June 3, 1945. Camp Hearn, Texas. Behind the wire, the guards are polite and the food is enough. For the first time, I fear going home more than being a prisoner. He writes this in pencil on army-issue paper, thin and slippery and stamped with a blue eagle. He signs only with his initials. K.H. The date. The camp. The line he could never mail. The truth he did not yet have the words to justify. The mathematics of hunger begins here, in a place without hunger. In a place where a German prisoner, number stitched to his shirt, meets white bread and coffee from a metal urn and realizes that the arithmetic of his future is not about victory or defeat. It is about calories. It is about roofs. It is about forms. June 10, 1945. Camp Hearn, Texas. The U.S. Army calls it a branch camp. The guards are light on their boots. They carry rifles, but they also carry jokes. It's the bugs that bite worst, not us, one of them tells a group of men hoeing cotton. The men laugh because laughter makes work move faster. The sun burns. Texas wind lifts dust. Trucks take the cotton away and bring peaches, canned beets, flour. A Red Cross crate arrives with cigarettes. The Germans learn the brands by the wrapper colors. Chesterfields. Lucky Strikes. Camels. In the evenings they read. There is a camp library. There is a bulletin board with cartoons drawn by a prisoner who had been a commercial artist in Leipzig. The Special Projects Division sends pamphlets, in English first, then in German. Democracy condensed into simple sentences. Photographs of voters in lines. Photographs of churches with intact roofs. Photographs of a town hall with a clock that works. June 1945. An interrogation report at Camp Hearn notes, prisoners exhibit relief at being out of the war. Many express fear of conditions in Germany. Casualty rates in their units were high. Letters from home, scarce and often delayed, paint a picture of destruction. The report is filed in a stack of papers the U.S. Army calls an intelligence summary. It says, in cool black type, what Karl wrote in pencil and fear. He is 29. He has been a fitter in a machine shop in Kassel. He joined the German Labour Front because everyone in the shop did. He was drafted in 1941. He learned to read maps. He learned how to use a protractor to find a line of fire. He went to Italy, and then to France, and then to captivity in late 1944. He knows the science of steel and the geometry of bridges. He does not yet know how to live in ruins. July 15, 1945. The Guards organize a soccer match. Germans versus Guards. Spectators with rolled-up sleeves sit on the grass. At halftime, an American sergeant hands out orange slices to both teams. A photograph survives in a shoebox in a cupboard years later. The grass is flat, and the sky is blank, and the goalposts are made from 2 broom handles planted deep. The Americans win, barely. The Germans shrug. The war is over here. The arithmetic shifts to days until departure. An occupation report from Washington lists the camps: Texas, Arizona, Colorado. It lists the numbers of Germans held. It lists the caloric intake: 3,000 calories daily in the U.S. camps, meat twice a day in some camps, lectures, films. The report remarks on discipline. Compliance is high. Some Nazi elements attempt to intimidate others. Isolation of troublemakers effective. Karl watches the re-education films. He hears German voices speaking over English narrators. The words are measured. A citizen is not a subject, a voice says. A law is not a command if it breaks the Constitution. He writes in his notebook about the lectures. They say every man must ask himself, I did not ask when they asked me to fill the form for the party, I will have to ask now. August 1945. Japan surrenders. The war ends everywhere. The US announces repatriation for many prisoners is months away. Some will go to Britain for labor, some will go to France. The arithmetic of distance begins to count down. The arithmetic of delay inflates. In a letter that never arrives, he writes to his mother in Kassel. He asks if the house still stands. He asks if she has potatoes. He asks if Ilse found work in the bakery. He places the letter in the camp postbag. Somewhere between Texas and Kassel, it disappears into the mathematics of missing. October 3rd, 1945. Texas nights are cooler now. The soup still contains meat. The guards loan records. Bing Crosby sings. A corporal tells Carl about the German community in Fredericksburg. German is spoken in church there. Carl eats an apple and imagines being a farmhand. He imagines knocking on some frame house door and asking to stay. He imagines a line he cannot cross. In a prisoner of war newsletter called Der Ruf, printed at a different camp, another man writes, "We found a country where the word doesn't always need the gun." Carl reads the reprinted extract tacked to the board by a camp captain. He underlines the sentence. He copies it into his notebook without attribution. Years later, in his own handwriting, it looks like confession. December 1945. The order comes to move. The war is 2 seasons gone, and the Americans begin to send men back to Europe. At the gate, a guard shakes hands with prisoners he supervised. "Good luck," he says. "I envy you the bread we have here," a prisoner says. Then he stops himself. He says only, "Thank you." January 15, 1946. Le Havre, France. The ship offloads Germans at a concrete quay scarred by explosions. The men shuffle in files to a warehouse. Coffee in dented mugs. Questions, name, rank, place of birth, next of kin, food in plates that clatter. Then the journey north by train. Through villages with holes punched through roofs. Through cities with entire blocks laid flat. January 20, 1946. Bremerhaven. A transit camp. Wind. Mud. A line for soup that never ends because the line feeds into itself. A nurse with a British accent looks into a mouth and notes rotten teeth. Clothing deloused. File opened. The file includes a form called Fragebogen, a questionnaire. 131 questions about affiliation and office. Membership in NSDAP, it asks. Positions in party organizations. It lists SA, SS, NS Frauenschaft, Hitler Youth, BDM, NS Volkswohlfahrt, Reichsbund Deutsche Beamten, DAF. Yes and no boxes wait like traps. Carl stares at the paper and thinks about the meetings he attended to get a better tool locker. He sees the form bending history into a grid. He puts an X in the box next to DAF. He leaves the rest blank. January 28, 1946. Castle. Cold. A city that is both city and gravel pit. Rail yards burn. The Henschel works a black lace of broken iron. The skyline jagged with fireplace chimneys without walls. In a British Army photograph, a chain of women in headscarves pass bricks hand to hand to a pile that grows like a red hill. Trümmerfrauen. A word that translates to bodies and to years. These are the women who sort rubble by material. Brick to brick, rebar to rebar, wood to wood. They receive ration certificates weighted to their labor, heavy, the local office stamps, 3,600 calories on paper, that in practice becomes 1,200 in the pan. The mathematics. Carl walks down what had been his street. He stands where his building had stood. A neighbor points him to a basement where the landlord stores coal. "That's all that's left," the neighbor says. "His mother is not there. She is alive, it turns out, but she has moved to a cousin's in a village near Fritzlar. The post is broken. The telephones are dead." Carl cannot find her until a week later. when a letter arrives with his name and CTO Rathaus Castle written on it, as if the city hall could serve as a man's coordinates. The curfew says he must be inside by 9. The Americans patrol in jeeps with a white star. The jeeps stop to speak with men standing in doorways. They ask for Ausweis. They enforce with politeness and with the power no one misunderstands. There are posters that read "off limits" with arrows pointing to buildings requisitioned by the occupation. There are streets renamed. There are forms and permits and passes pinned to lapels with small metal clips. An occupation report, February 1946, attitude of population in Kassel area, mixture of relief, resignation, fear. Little overt resignation, fear. Little overt resistance. Trauma clearing proceeds slowly due to lack of equipment. The same report notes, rumors of retaliation by foreign laborers persist, isolated incidents of theft and assault recorded, civilians advised to avoid certain areas at night. The mathematics of fear is measured in streets crossed before dark. It is measured in the way women carry keys as if keys can stop hands in the dark. It is measured in whispered names of places you do not go. But the US zone in Hesse is not the Red Army zone. Stories come from the east like cold from a door left open. Stories of things done in basements and stairwells and fields. Many of the men in the queue at the ration office shake their heads when they hear the stories, and then stare at the ground. Guilt cuts numbers into sharper pieces in some places than in others. The arithmetic of memory begins to add and subtract selectively. March 5, 1946. Ration cards are issued in the Rathaus. A clerk stamps boxes. Category 2, he says. Normal consumer, Carl argues. I work in rubble 3 days a week. That is heavy. The clerk points to a list on the wall. Heavy labor requires a letter from a supervisor. Carl shows his employment ticket. The clerk shrugs. Bring me a signature from the Stadtrat, he says. The queue shifts. The ink dries on the stamp on Carl's card. 1,220 calories. Bread ration cut. Fat ration cut. The mathematics of fat is the mathematics of winter. Black market. The words shape shift in mouths. Schwarzmarkt. Zigarettenwehrung. Cigarettes become the yardstick. A liter of milk costs 10 cigarettes. A pair of shoes costs. A dress piece costs 80. There is no stable exchange rate. Small markets happen in alleys and in the back of trams. An American cigarette dispatch turns a tin of horseflesh into 2 kilograms of butter, 3 stops later in the hands of a woman with a basket. An Allied intelligence summary, May 1946. German population engaged in extensive illicit trading due to insufficient official rations. Cigarettes serve as primary medium of exchange. GI personnel implicated in diversion. The report is cold and correct. It reads like math. Carl buys a pair of bicycle tires made of wood. He cycles to farms on hamster trips. Hamston. To forage. To barter. He takes his father's old razor, a few pocket watches salvaged from rubble, a worn coat. He comes back with potatoes and a ham. In the village, he sleeps on a straw mattress in a barn. He wakes to cold that feels like theft. Back in Kassel, Trummer women warm their hands over a barrel fire and trade recipes that make coffee from acorns and cake from carrots. In a winter after that, when the bitter statistic becomes an idiom, it will be called Die Hunger Winter, plural, because scarcity repeats. May 1946. He retrieves his mother from the cousin's house near Fritzlar. She has lost weight. She hides a bundle of family papers under her coat, birth certificates, baptismal records, the deed to a house that no longer exists. In a photograph dated 1937, the family stands before that house. A vine curls up the stucco. In 1946, the stucco is a pile of dust. Carl holds the photo in his hand on the tram and thinks, proof is a luxury. June 1st, 1946. The Fragebogen appears again, this time in an envelope with the seal of the military government. The form is now the grammar of the next decade. The form divides and classifies major offenders, offenders, lesser offenders, followers, exonerated. It is a taxonomy torn from law and stitched to survival. It will be enforced by Sprüchkammern, which translates blandly as chambers of judgment and carries the weight of an era. He fills the form honestly where it will not hurt him. He writes no where no is possible. He attaches a statement from Pastor Vogel, who remembers him as a boy in the church choir. A Purcellschein, the people call it, a Purcell certificate, named for a detergent brand that promises to wash whites whiter. The phrase is a joke and not a joke. It is a technology of exoneration. July 1946. An occupation report on denazification. US zone has distributed approximately 13 million questionnaires. Results indicate large numbers of party members at follower level. Sprüchkammern established to process cases. Aim is to prevent resurgence of Nazism, not to destroy economic life. The numbers are numbers with teeth. There is no way to purge a society of itself without destroying the society. The mathematics of guilt must be made to serve the mathematics of stability. Karl is called to a hearing, a room in a former school. The panel consists of 3 Germans. One is a judge who was removed from his post and then returned after he signed a statement. One is a social democrat. One is a school principal. A US officer sits at a table in the back and says nothing. The questions are flat. Were you ever an officer in the party? Did you profit from Aryanization? Did you denounce neighbors? Karl answers no in a voice that is not quite his. He is categorized Mitläufer, follower, with no significant guilt. He must pay a fine that hurts. He must attend a lecture on democratic principles. He will not go to prison. He will not lose the right to work. He walks out into the rain and feels the arithmetic of his life adjust by a fraction. Not everyone walks out. A man who had been a block warden and who had denounced a Jewish shopkeeper goes to a prison for a term. A former Gestapo clerk is put on a list called automatic arrest and sent to an internment camp. But the list is long and the capacity of courts is short. The files fill cabinets. The cabinets fill rooms. Busy, careful hands file the papers. By 1949, most cases will resolve as Karl's did. Mitläufer. The categories collapse under the weight of necessity. The arithmetic of guilt slides into the algebra of amnesia. September 1946. Trains arrive from the east. People descend with rucksacks and small trunks. The straps cut shoulders. The labels are threadbare. Silesia, East Prussia, Pomerania, Sudetenland. They are Germans with accents. A Kassel ear hears as song and as foreign. They are called Vertriebene, expellees. They have papers stamped by Czechoslovak authorities that say expelled. They have wounds stitched with rough thread. They go to the housing office where the city tells citizens how much room a citizen now needs. This is the mathematics of rooms. A table on the wall says 2 persons per heated room. If the room is larger than a certain calculation of square meters, 3, sometimes 4. The words are Kinderzimmer and Schlafraum and Küche combined into a ledger. The law says you must share. The hunger says you must hide. The city posts notices assigning a family from Görlitz to a back room in a family from Kassel's apartment. The woman from Kassel says, "We also lost," and then goes to the butcher and sees the woman from Görlitz ahead of her in line and feels anger like a fever. Karl learns this math quickly because he is offered a job in the city office that administers housing. He takes it. He had tried to get work at Henschel, but the factory is only now restarting, and the queue is long. The city needs men who can handle numbers and forms. He can. He takes a desk and a chair salvaged from a school. He hangs a coat on a nail in the wall and becomes part of the arithmetic of other people's breath. October 10th, 1946. A memo from the Housing Office, Kassel. Priority for housing, families with children, widows, war, disabled, expellees. New building is at standstill due to material shortages. Requisition of rooms under Ordinance Number X authorized. Karl signs the memo with his initials. K.H. He writes the letters on carbon paper that stains his thumb. He knows this paper is a fragile dam. Behind it, a reservoir of rage. A woman comes with a child on her hip. She holds a letter from a landrat saying she must accommodate a family of 4 from Königsberg in her apartment. "We already have my mother sleeping in the kitchen," she says. "There is no place to put them." Karl's eyes fall on the form. He sees 4 boxes at the bottom. The boxes say, "Appeal." He circles one. He says, "We will look again." He writes pending in a margin. He is not sure whether he is helping anyone or helping himself survive the day. The expellees fill the streets of towns with their boots and their hope. They also fill the rolls of the Labour Office. A baker from Breslau who cannot find an oven. A schoolteacher from Liberec whose certifications are not recognized. An old man who refuses to speak except to say the street names of the home he lost. Associations form quickly. Landsmannschaften. The geography of loss becomes public and political. The arithmetic of democracy must now include people whose experience of democracy will begin with being told how many people can sleep in their one room. Displaced persons. The capital letters are part of the new vocabulary. DPs live in camps not far from German cities. Some of them are Jews who survived. Some of them are Polish and Ukrainian. Former forced laborers who do not want to go back to places where their neighbors collaborated with murder. Some of them are weary men who change stories to avoid being sent across certain borders. In an Allied report from late 1946, a line reads, DP Camp Zeilsheim, approximately 3,000 Jewish DPs housed. Morale improving with increased food supplies and cultural activities. It is 20 miles from Kassel to a DP camp near there. No. Zeilsheim is near Frankfurt. Karl sees it when he travels for a training course. The bus passes close to the camp. He sees men and women standing by a fence. He sees them holding hats in hands. He sees, for a moment, eyes that do not look away. In a city hall in Frankfurt, an exhibition of atrocity photographs hangs as part of a re-education drive. The film Die Todesmühlen is shown in cinemas. People sit through it and keep their faces still. In Kassel, a US officer insists that the film run even when the projector breaks and the audience grows restive. The Allied intelligence summary records, audience reactions mixed. Some deny, some cry. Some leave. Many sit with empty expressions. Karl was in Texas when such films were first shown. He had only heard rumors. Now he sees photographs of heaps of shoes. He sees the white face of a woman who should be alive. He walks out into the daylight and finds himself counting his steps because numbers feel manageable. He hears the word guilt in German and in English. Schuld. It is both debt and blame. It is both simple and unpayable. The mathematics of guilt is not linear. A man who wore an armband but did not denounce anyone must answer for the regime he supported with his silence. A man who did not join the party but bought a rug from an Aryanized shop must answer for the savings he kept. People add and subtract these things in their heads and arrive at zero. or arrive at a number that is too large to write down. February 1947. The winter is cruel. Snow lies heavy on piles of brick. Coal trains are late. The official ration dips. Hunger edema appears in doctors' reports. The phrase sounds like a euphemism, but it is not. Children have swollen bellies. Old men have thin wrists like bundle sticks. The British and Americans calculate calorie allowances and write cables to London and Washington saying, "We cannot govern starving people." The mathematics of policy begins to change. April 1947. B-Zone. The American and British zones merge administratively. The merging is not romantic. It is done with staplers and with tables that convert one set of regulations into another. It is done because the mathematics of economies demands scale. A US policy telegram changes the premise. The new law is no longer JCS 1067, which said Germany should not be built up, but a different directive that says it must be. Factories may open, steel quotas loosen. In Kassel, Henschel begins to manufacture locomotives. The city hums with the sound of machine tools waking up. Karl hears it and feels something like hope. He applies again. He is offered a job as a timekeeper in a small shop contracted to make parts for a larger factory in the Ruhr. He weighs the paperweight of steady city pay against the clank of a workshop. He stays in the housing office. He tells himself that a desk allows him to help more people. He tells himself that the small power he has is better used here, where the algebra of rooms is a daily test. June 1947. The Marshall Plan is announced. European recovery. The speech is in English in a warm Harvard afternoon. It arrives in Kassel in the form of sacks of milk powder stamped with ERP. It arrives as a shipload of flour that someone in Hamburg then counts, and someone in Frankfurt then allocates, and someone in Kassel then signs for. Car packages arrive at doorways with a thud, sometimes with a note. From Mrs. Miller of Iowa. Karl opens one with his mother at their table. There is coffee. That is coffee. There is a tin of pineapple. There is soap that makes a smell in the room like a window opened to a place where war did not happen. His mother cries. He writes a letter to Iowa and thanks Mrs. Miller for the pineapple. He does not know if she reads broken German. He does not know if she is real. He writes anyway. August 1947. A Sprüchkammer in Kassel reduces sentences for several men. The Allied officer nods. The Cold War has begun in earnest. The mathematics of justice will be scaled to the mathematics of the new conflict. Files are closed. New files open. There is a list of former civil servants who will be restored under future laws. Article 31, people will call it later. It is still a rumor. But the men who had been purged are already practicing their signatures again. The school books arrive with their own mathematics. A 1947 history textbook speaks of the war as if it were weather. Storms came, we suffered. There is a page on the Treaty of Versailles. There is a paragraph on the seizure of power. There is a column of dates. There are few names other than Hitler's. The children memorize the column and not the bodies. The teacher, who was a party member, now stresses the dangers of ideology and the importance of order. He knows what to emphasize. He arranges the arithmetic of words to fit the room. Autumn 1947. The Jewish DP camp, Zielsheim, organizes a theater performance. Survivors play roles in a comedy they have revived from Warsaw. They laugh very hard at a joke about landlords. A US cultural officer notes in a report that humor returns like a friend. The resilience of these communities is nothing short of marvelous, he writes. A German doctor from Frankfurt volunteers at the camp. He writes in his diary, I saw a boy with a number on his arm. He wanted chocolate. I gave him mine. The entry is traced in a hand that presses too hard. Karl visits Zielsheim by chance when the office sends him to Frankfurt to pick up new ration cards printed by a French firm contract. He steps off the tram at the wrong stop and sees a sign pointing to the camp. He follows out of curiosity and stands 100 meters away. He watches. He does not enter. He tells himself he has no official reason to go in. He tells himself there is nothing he can do. He walks back to the tram with the cards in a satchel and his heart beating hard, because the line between witness and bystander is not a line on the ground. It runs through a person. January 1, 1948. An Allied intelligence summary. Germany, public mood cautious. Denazification fatigue widespread. Desire to draw a line expressed frequently. Economic depression expected unless reforms enacted. The summary is right. The currency is failing. Reichsmarks multiply without value. Sacks of cash change hands on the black market for a string of sausages. German humor is blacker. We are rich in zeros, the man behind Karl says in line. The line laughs because laughter is a currency that does not inflate. June 20, 1948. Currency reform. Währungsreform. The Deutsche Mark appears. It comes in packages handed out at post offices. Each person receives 40 marks in a stack. The city sweats with the fear that this too will be a trick. Streets that were empty in the mornings now fill with people pushing prams without babies in them because the prams are for carrying soap and coffee if any appears. Stores open shutters that have been closed for years. On a street that had only shoelaces for sale for months, suddenly shoes appear. The black market empties like a basin with a plug pulled. Cigarettes are still money. But they are no longer the basis of the math. The same day, the Soviets begin to blockade Berlin. The airlift begins. Planes drone overhead day and night. Children in Berlin learn the names of airplane parts. A pilot drops candy attached to tiny parachutes and becomes a legend. Kassel is not Berlin, but it feels the new border like a draft under a door. The line between zones stiffens. A cousin in the Soviet zone writes that life there is different. The party is a different party. The slogans change, but the shape of disciplining is familiar. Karl reads the letter and thinks about the mathematics of loyalty. It has shifted again. Summer 1948. Work flows. Factories order. Coal arrives with better regularity. Karl watches as the housing lists get shorter in the way that a beach gets shorter when the tide goes out, slowly and with little mercy for stranded things. The city begins to plan new construction. Blueprints unfurl across tables. Social housing blocks are sketched. Later they will rise with the clean lines of a new era, with names like Siedlung and Neubau that could be brands of optimism. In November, Karl is offered an apartment in a new block slated for 1950 completion. It is a promise, not a key. He says yes. He saves the letter. He places it next to his mother's certificates in a tin box that he keeps under the bed. He writes in his notebook, in a sentence better than he normally writes, "We are building something that is not a miracle, but only work." January 1949. The Federal Republic is not yet declared, but its organs begin to form. Councils, committees. The Constitutional Convention in Bonn drafts a document called the Basic Law. The preamble says it is provisional because division is provisional and pain is provisional. The articles guarantee rights and describe institutions. The drafters argue in the language of deficits and checks. They insist that the rule of law must be the rule and not only a phrase. In the US High Commissioner's office, men read the document with magnifying glasses of politics. They nod. They ask for changes. They permit independence, like a father permits a son to work alone on a piece of wood. 1949. The Federal Republic is born. Bonn is the capital because Berlin cannot be. The Chancellor is a man from the Rhineland who had been a mayor and a prisoner under the Nazis. He speaks the language of cold coins and warm beds. He makes bargains. He signs laws that will later be called morally grey and practically necessary. He asks the Allies for sovereignty. He asks the Germans for patience. He smiles, the smile of a man who has seen worse days than this. Karl continues to work in housing. The expellees become part of the neighborhood. He marries a woman named Erna in 1949. She is from Breslau. She was 20 when she arrived on a train with only a small suitcase and a photograph of a church with a broken spire. She works in a textile shop that reopened after the reform. She pins cloth to torsos. She smooths folds with the flat of her hand. She calls her mother in each letter, Liebe Mutti, and writes the same 3 lines each week. We have not forgotten you. There is little to send. They live in a room with a coal stove. They save for the day when the letter with the key arrives. The key arrives in March 1951. The new apartment sits on the 3rd floor of a block that looks like a row of mouthfuls of teeth. The stairwell smells of cement dust and paint. The rooms are small, but the windows hold out wind. The kitchen has a sink with a drain that drains. There is a place for a table. They carry a table up the stairs, borrowed from Erna's boss, who has a truck. The neighbor is an expellee from the Sudetenland, who wears his hair parted like a schoolboy even though he is 60. The other neighbor is a widow with 2 children whose husband disappeared in Russia in 1944. They have war clocks that strike at different minutes. At night, the clocks talk to each other in a conversation that will become familiar as comfort. 1951. Article 31 goes into law. Restoration of rights to public servants. Men who had been removed because of past affiliations return to offices. Police captains, tax officials, teachers, judges. The mathematics of public service resets. A man who had signed his name under the letter ordering a neighbor deported is now in charge of property taxes. He is older. He says he was a follower. He says he was a follower. He says he was a follower. He says he did not have a choice. That sentence, that small pivot on the word choice, becomes a coin that changes hands so often it grows thin. McCloy, the US High Commissioner, commutes sentences of industrialists and officers. The Landsberg prison empties slowly. A photograph shows men leaving the gate in suits. In the Jewish DP press, the editor writes, "We remember different numbers." In a German city hall, a clerk files the order. Karl reads the names with a flat expression. He knows that his life is now built with these men as part of the structure. He tells himself the walls must stand. The mathematics of restitution emerges. Wiedergutmachung, a word that tries to say something impossible, to make good again, to fix. The law writes formulas, a percentage of loss of property, a calculation of lost months. The paperwork is immense. Claims offices staff up. The Bundesarchiv begins to become the repository of the century's paper. Boxes are labeled with ink. A Jewish family files a claim for a house on a street in Frankfurt. The house is occupied by a German family who moved in under orders in 1942. The law returns the house to the original owners. The German family must move. They write a letter to the newspaper. They say, "We also suffered." The letter starts a small storm. The arithmetic of justice and the arithmetic of suffering share numbers, but not always solutions. In the schoolbooks, new paragraphs emerge. A passage mentions the camps by name. Another passage speaks of resistance as if it had been unbroken and widespread. The pages of 1951 are less silent than those of 1947. but they are still careful. Children memorize facts about the Berlin airlift. They memorize the number of planes per day. They memorize less about the numbers of those who died in the camps. The teacher draws a diagram of the new German flag, and the boy in the second row asks if they may have a wall map again. The teacher shrugs. There are many maps now, he says. 1952. A law called the Lastenausgleich is passed. Equalization of burdens. It sets out a scheme to tax wealth to compensate those who lost their homes in the East. The figures are precise. A percentage over 30 years. The program becomes a way to thread expellees into the fabric without tearing it. In practice, it also opens a conversation in every living room. We had too little already, a worker says. They had to leave what we lost, an expellee says. They drink together anyway because winter is long. In the housing office, a memo crosses Karl's desk about a new Siedlung on the edge of the city. He signs for concrete shipments. He attends a meeting with a US advisor who tells the Germans to adopt American building codes. The advisor smiles and admits that the codes are adaptable. The Germans adopt what they can afford. The arithmetic of cost and safety meets the arithmetic of scarcity. The result is compromise and a few cracks. 1953. An uprising in East Berlin. The radio in the kitchen speaks of workers marching with signs that say bread and freedom. Tanks answer with their own language. The West calls.